And we're recording. Welcome back to another Epidose of These Crazy People Just Keep Eating Meat and Can't Stop Talking About It. Today, we have a new topic. Well, it's a topic you might have already heard of. We all started reading Fat of the Land. We all recorded chapters. They're all getting put up and strung together so everybody can enjoy the book, even though it's not available in audio format, it is now available in video format. And you too can experience the wonder of this great book written by anthropologist and world traveler Wilhelm Stephenson. And you can hear all about people who just eat meat and how glorious Pemmican is and how problematic the bureaucracies of government can be. It's a wonderful book. So I've got three of my usual suspects with me. They all contributed to the effort. And we thought we'd come on and talk about some of the highlights of the book, what we thought about it, what the experience of reading it was like. And so now, who do I pick on first? Let's go straight to Emily and put Emily on the spot. Emily, what do you say?
Hi. So I read chapter 7, and I had to make notes and look up words like miasma. Miasma? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Miasma is a highly unpleasant or unhealthy smell or vapor. The miasma of death. It was talking about, my whole chapter is chapter 7, the black leg of Shakespeare's time. And so it was all about scurvy. And the grossest part, if you like gross stuff, listen to chapter 7, because he talks about how their gums became, whenever people had scurvy, their gums became so soft that you could cut into it like cheese with a toothpick. Ew.
That's gross.
And then this guy thought he was pulling something out between his teeth, and he actually pulled his tooth out without any pain. Just like pulled his tooth out. That's because his gums were so soft.
Now, this is caused by lack of vitamin C and not by methamphetamines, correct?
Correct. These were sailors out at sea who had scurvy.
But we're not on amphetamines.
We're not on amphetamines. No.
This is the age before.
Yes.
No. We wanna preface, so the sailors were eating something called hardtack, which was like I don't know if they said that in the book. Well, yeah, actually, he did mention the hardtack.
They say prepared meat or salted
meat plus hardtack. So it was like a biscuit.
Yeah, hardtack or pilot crackers are really dry bread.
Dried bread. And
I think it was one of the big companies like Nabisco or something had just stopped making those. Yeah. You could buy them in the supermarket up to, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. And it was a common staple because it didn't spoil easy, right? It didn't mold, right. So it was common. But it's basically just flour and sugar and salt and stuff like that. So
wouldn't people put that in their coffee? They'd use it as like a stir stick.
Yeah.
And have it in their coffee.
That's kind of like that. That's right.
Yeah, in the New England area, it was very common to put it in like clam chowder and stuff. So they'd have these big pilot crackers, and they'd kind of break them up and put them in their clam chowder. It was traditional food, but of course, yeah, kind of a nautical theme in that area.
Like oyster crackers?
A little bit.
Yeah, it's harder. Imagine like a giant oyster cracker that's kind of solid.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Really hard. You have to have it in liquid just to soften it enough to eat it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Not hard. Yeah.
So
and I just want to say here that so a lot of people think that going carnivore you'll lack vitamin C and will end up with scurvy. We have 1 to 2 year to 2.5 year carnivores here. No scurvy in sight. Pretty good. Don't feel like I'm gonna pull out a tooth. So what's up with that, Tom, Raymond, or Emily? What went wrong? What did they do?
Yeah.
Can I talk about vitamin C real quick?
Yeah, sure. That's a great idea.
Human beings are one of the few animals that doesn't make vitamin C inside their bodies. And, I've had this conversation with Bart before, and we're both kind of under the assumption, and I'm sure a lot of other people are too, that we don't make it anymore because we don't need it. And we are probably adapted to just live on the little bit of vitamin C that's in meat. So meat has a little bit of vitamin C in it. And when you don't eat carbohydrates, you don't need as much. One of the problems with eating sugar and flour and all that stuff is that the glucose, I think it is, competes with the vitamin C for transport. So when you have a bunch of sugar floating around in your system, the vitamin C doesn't get around. But we don't really need that much vitamin C. And I know everybody's vitamin C crazy. That craze seemed to start back with Linus Pauling. He adopted somebody else's theory that everybody needed vitamin C. Vitamin C was a, cure for everything. And of course, when you see, they knew that vitamin C was a cure for things like scurvy. But also we know that if you eat fresh meat, you don't get scurvy. So that's it in a nutshell. And yeah, us carnivores don't seem to get scurvy at all. We don't seem to be deficient in vitamin C. We don't seem to be deficient in vitamin D, and so on and so forth. So that's my little speech on vitamin C.
Great. So one thing that we have to also remember too, so those hardtack and the dried meat, first of all, the dried meat had no vitamin C, but I think it's a little more than just vitamin C. Hardtack, what it does is actually strips your body of essential minerals and vitamins. And that's actually proven by, there's studies that they do, the oyster study, that when it took out if you ate, I think, what was it, soy or something with the oyster, that you'd actually lose more iron than actually the oysters had in it. And it actually stripped away that. But if you ate the oysters alone, oh, I'm sorry, zinc. It was zinc, yeah. You get all of the zinc. And you remember hearing that, right, Tom?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, so that takes us back to what's commonly described as anti-nutrients.
Yeah, anti-nutrients. So I believe it's a combination of the anti-nutrients. If they just stayed on the meat, dried meat, they probably would have been fine. But because they went on a hard tack, it started stripping them of all the essential stuff. And then that's where the scurvy started kicking in. So the mixture was not a good mixture for them.
And interestingly enough, the whalers used to go buy fresh meat from the Eskimos when they were passing through the Arctic areas, because they knew they had to have fresh meat, and so they ate the Eskimo meat. So, and traded them tobacco, which we were talking about earlier. A lot of Eskimos smoked a lot of tobacco from the time they were young to like 8, and they still lived long lives somehow. So
that poses the question: do you think these sailors were smoking also?
Oh, most
likely.
I'm sure.
Do you think they were drinking also?
I'm
sure.
Yes, they were.
That was part of their rations. Typically, they drank things like rum and grog and stuff like that.
I think even wine.
Beer.
So how interesting, we have all of these combinations, but yet it's pointed at the meat.
Yeah, there's all kinds of confounding factors. They're eating preserved foods.
Right.
They're eating, stuff that's meant to last a long time, but wasn't necessarily nourishing. They would hopefully catch some fish and stuff like that, but they didn't always get fish. So if they're out in the middle of nowhere with I think there was a TV commercial for Bass Ale, and it was talking about one of the Arctic explorers took cases of Bass Ale with him. He had to drag that on his sled. Can you imagine taking bottles of Bass Ale with you? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but yeah, who knows what they were eating?
Exactly.
And
that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's so many confounding factors. So I don't know how they even had the thought pattern back then to say eating meat causes scurvy, right? You've got all of these, especially nowadays that we know, well, alcohol has its issues by itself. Smoking had its issues by itself. They did both of those.
Well, and we know from the books that the explorers and the sea captains and stuff, they knew that if they ate fresh meat, that they wouldn't get scurvy.
They also knew eating fresh meat. But that actually shows to me the amazingness of meat, fresh meat, that it actually could counter all of the negative effects of all this other crap.
Well, they also knew that if they had citrus, they used citrus because it lasts longer than like apples. So they would, use lime juice. They put lime juice in their beer or whatever. That staved off scurvy sometimes, and because it they figured it was something in there later described as vitamin C. But even that didn't work all the time. And that is why, I don't know if you guys ever know this, but like one of the nicknames for people from Great Britain are limeys. And one of the reasons was they were known for sucking on limes, from the seafaring days.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting about the chapter that I read was that it talked about the mental health aspects, that those were the beginning symptoms. And it really makes you see the correlation of poor diet and, nutrient deficiencies, because it started out that they were just irritable. They were just cranky and irritable. And then it turned into pessimism, and then it turned into hopelessness. And then it says that 3 to 4 weeks before death, that they were like, who cares? Like complete, just nothing matters. And that it describes that they were so deep in depression that they didn't even want to like kill themselves, because they didn't even have enough energy to want to commit suicide, that they were just so destitute. And I think that shows a direct correlation to mental illness whenever you have poor diet.
It's a good point. So if I could, I would like to circle back to the language. Now, is there anybody here who did not come across words that they did not know?
Oh yeah, a few words I didn't know.
Yeah, I stumbled across several.
Can you read that? It's backwards, isn't it?
No, it turns it around. Let me see it.
Scourge.
Miasma.
Scourge is a thing that causes great trouble or suffering.
Right.
And I've never heard that, so I had to look up quite a few words.
Now, the author was born in the 1800s, and who knows when he started writing this, but certainly probably in the mid 40s, and it came out in the 50s. So the sentence structure and a lot of the phrases and stuff that were probably common then are not common now. So it is a very challenging read.
To me, it kind of read like a diary,
Yeah, mine too, because mine was like, on May 10th, this happened. On May 15th, that happened.
And
so I would take it from that the sections of the book are very different, like chapter to chapter, because mine was not
Right.
like that.
I was going to say mine, he quoted a bunch of other articles. So
Justin, which chapter did you read?
I read chapter 11, Pemmican Romance. Ooh, yeah. Basically talking about the sailors and explorers deep in the Arctic or the northern parts of Canada, Nova Scotia, etc., loving pemmican because it was so filling. And even if they had the option to eat something else, they wouldn't. They would eat like their pemmican again. And then there was one story, I think, where one of the captains traded away their pemmican, I think, for beer or liquor. It was like beer or wine or something, and like regretting it later. Yeah, and some about how to make the pemmican when it comes back to England, when they started mass producing pemmican, both I believe in Europe and the United States. Kind of covers some of that too. The late 1930s, I believe. Yeah, so just more of that. Some diaries, some other people's diaries. And the native people, have they been making pemmican forever, and different kinds of pemmican, and how it's better with a little bit of horsehair in it. Yeah.
Wow.
What?
I
Why?
was expecting that horsehair. What the hell?
Why?
It's
They
hard to
just-
imagine eating any kind of hair.
They needed the fiber.
Because you knew it was authentic pemmican if there was, a little bit of like horsehair in it and like different stuff that was just mixed together. Because, it's not like they were washing their hands and stuff like that when they were making it, so they would pretty much just make it in the middle of whatever else they were doing.
Right.
You know.
So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, a few facts about him. So, I mean, you kind of already mentioned, but Valmir Stephenson was an Arctic explorer, ethnologist, lecturer, writer, born the 3rd of November, 1979 in Arnez, MB. I don't know where that is.
1879.
Not eight. I was gonna say 1879, not
1879. What did I say?
1979. I was born in 1979.
I know, right? I'm like, look, dude.
So Emily is 100 years younger than
You're right.
Wilhelmer.
Just so you guys know, that's how the reading went. Chapter 11, there's a few parts that come out just like that. 1879, died the 26th of August, 1962 in Hanover, New Hampshire. Over the course of 3 forays in the Arctic between 1906 and 1918, Valmir Stephenson, one of Canadian's most renowned Arctic explorers, traveled more than 32,000 kilometers by sled and dog team and explored some of the world's last uncharted territory. Of his expeditions, and best well known was the Canadian Arctic Expedition, which he led between 1913 and 1918. By the 1920s, Stephenson traveled and writing had turned him into an internationally recognized personality, and he created more interest in the Arctic among Canadians than any other individual of his time. No stranger to controversy, Stephenson often had a polarizing effect on the public. Supporters considered him a visionary, genius, and prophet of the North, while detractors labeled him a reckless and manipulative adventurer. So yeah, so probably that exploration between 1913 and 1918 was when he was writing Fat of the Land, I would assume, which its original name was Not by Bread Alone. Correct, Tom?
That's correct. And he wrote a number of other books as well. I think Not by Bread Alone is supposed to be the first installment. And then when they reissued the book, they changed the name to Fat of the Land and added an introduction. So how about Ray? Ray, which chapter did you read?
Chapter 12, and this was all about, it was called Pemmican in Transit. This was, he wanted to make a good point about how this pemmican is the perfect food because of its lightweight versus the density. He actually goes into subjects like how much pemmican it takes for a day's ration. I think he said one pemmican's enough for a whole day's ration, and he even goes down to actually he said 36 hours. So he said that it's the perfect army food. He didn't know why the army would not pick up on it, so he'd go on these journals and quote them. And he's like, that was the time that they had the dietitian, them fighting against each other and would not accept the meat, the pemmican, because back then that's when it was thought to be bad. And he couldn't understand logically how important it was for the hunters and the explorers, that how valuable it was for them, and they knew how valuable it was. And he couldn't understand why they wouldn't take it for army, because he thought that would be very popular during that time. But during that time, it happened to be peacetime, so there wasn't really much talk about it. So he did mention that. And so they didn't explore it that seriously. But even after that, when the Civil War came along, it still didn't really spark that well. It was quite a long, kind of boring part, but it was interesting about the whole war. How come the war machine didn't take over with Pemmican?
That's interesting, because Philip Meese talks about that with the Carnivore Bar, that that's his vision, is to be able to supply that to the military. And it's quite still not, I mean, MREs are, totally not good. They're not a good source of nutrients at all.
Well, I did chapter 1 and chapter 13. In chapter 13, the Second Pemmican War, he gets very much into why the military didn't adopt it.
What do they say?
So what happened was the dietitians got involved, of course. So as it goes, pemmican is thought to be the ideal emergency food and traveling food because it takes up very little space and it's very little weight. So a person who's very active, doing a lot of work, can survive very nicely on a half a pound ration 3 to 4 times a day. And the military adopted the K Ration, which is invented by Ansel Keys, everybody's favorite guy, right? And so the K Ration was twice as heavy and twice as bulky as pemmican. So it costs, especially when they're loading stuff on airplanes. So the airplane had to carry a survival ration for 10 days for everybody on the plane. So you can imagine the impact on space in the plane and weight, which was very crucial. And then, of course, it was the food it was a choice of mountain men. The Plains Indians in North America had invented pemmican. The ideal pemmican that most people enjoyed was 80% of calories from fat and 20% from lean meat, mostly made from buffalo or bison or cows or whatever. And what had happened was when the Army tested this pemmican, it actually was mostly made up of dried coconut, dried apples. It had dextrose in it and sometimes cornmeal and something else. So it had all this this carbohydrate in it, from dried fruit basically, and it would spoil much faster, and it was a lot bulkier. So people would have to eat a lot more of it. And what happens if you eat more than like half a pound at a time, people tend to get nauseated because there's so much fat. But if you learn to just eat a half a pound at a time or nibble on it as you go, you don't experience that. So, and people feel really good on it, and they could do a lot of work. They have a lot of energy and stuff like that. So that's really what happened in why the U.S. military didn't adopt it. And of course, we all know that Ansel Keys is kind of the loudmouth who insisted that saturated fat caused heart disease, and kind of really got us down this road because he kind of just outshouted everybody else, like John Yudkin and stuff like that, who were saying, no, I don't think that the evidence is clear that it's saturated fat. And so anyways, yeah, that's a lot that goes on in the book. It talks about the testing and what was going on behind the scenes, and the applications, and how even white Europeans that were arriving were buying pemmican and using it for 300 years before this. And they were all swearing to it. And then all the Arctic explorers like Admiral Peary and stuff like that, they took pemmican with, and they ate it every meal for every day for a year at a time and enjoyed it and were healthy. And pemmican can last 30 years without being canned. But once they started adding stuff to it, it would go rancid if they didn't can it. So now you're adding more weight, more expense.
And what was interesting that I saw is apparently pemmican, they didn't even add salt to it.
Right. And that was another thing in the Army rations that they were testing. They were adding at least 1% salt. They had 4 or 5, I think it was 4 different versions of it that they tested. And it was just various quantities of like shredded coconut, apple, and dextrose and salt. But regular pemmican doesn't even have salt.
Crazy, huh?
So there supposedly were a stash of pemmican that was found that was just wrapped in rawhide in a cabin somewhere, and it was like 27 years old.
Oh no, I think it was older than that. It was like
it hadn't changed. And then they talk about mutton fat at a house in Florida, that an open can of mutton fat that lasted 30 years and never went rancid. So
Wow.
there's all these examples, and then of course the explorers weren't complaining. But the other confounding factor was, since so many Arctic explorers used it, and people assumed it was an Eskimo invention or an Inuit invention, and so they thought it was a cold weather food, and that eating that much fat was disagreeable in the summer.
Right.
Now, I remember when I was a kid, it was like, oh, well, in Central and South America, they eat a lot of greasy, fatty foods down there, but that's okay because they live in the tropics. So when I was a kid, I remember hearing the exact opposite. And Stephenson talks about this war of ideas. And then, of course, this adulteration with pemmican, adding berries or whatever for flavoring, was really just kind of a preference of Europeans who started coming across from the East Coast, and they weren't used to eating just one food. They're used to, fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. Because the typical diet on the Eastern Seaboard, the Indians were growing corn and squash and hunting turkeys. There wasn't a lot of meat, and people who settled on the East Coast were kind of used to that. So they brought whatever foods they could from Europe, and then the Indians on the East Coast didn't really eat pemmican. It wasn't until you got more towards the interior, where you have all these bison roaming around, that it became the preferential food. So anyways.
Yeah, I was really confused by that when I read that in my chapter about them thinking it was a cold weather food, and then like talking about tropics and stuff. Like when I read that part, I was really confused. But thank you for clearing that up for me, Tom. It was like, well, why would it matter? I guess they thought if you ate so much fat that it insulated the Eskimos. So if you ate it in the tropics, you would get too hot, I think is what it was. And there's some story about a guy with a bunch of mosquitoes and stuff like that. One of the travels. Yeah.
Stevenson actually made a point to actually say, when they did the trial, what was that hospital trial? What was that called again? The hospital that they went into?
Oh, when is it locked in Bellevue?
Yeah, Bellevue
They're
Hospital.
doing the study. Yeah.
So he made a point to say that his buddy that did that trial also went south to Florida and had the best health, and that was a hot climate, and he thrived on a carnivore diet.
And that same guy, Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess he had previously worked in Florida on an orange grove, and when he was not on a carnivore diet, he would get sick frequently or something like that.
That's right. Actually, before he started a carnivore diet again, he was actually having some problems.
Right.
Which after it, he came back better than ever.
Right. So just to clarify for everybody listening, we have a long list of people who read different chapters of the book. It's, I don't know Justin, you remember how many total chapters there were?
14?
I have the email here.
It's at least 14 chapters plus the notes at the beginning. And I just wanted to mention that A-Day Fox was the one who really pulled it together. Caitlin Weeks, or the grass-fed girl, she read. I read. Sarah, Carnivore Yogi, I think is still going to do a chapter. Dr. Lisa, the carnivore doctor, Lisa Wiederman, she did a chapter. I know Sean Baker did a chapter. He did chapter 4, and he did a good job. Michael Anthony, I don't know. I've been a fan of Michael Anthony's for a while. He did a chapter. Emily did a chapter. Bart K, our little pirate watchdog friend from New Zealand, he did a chapter. I can't wait to hear that. Travis Statham, Carnaway. You guys might know him from World Carnivore Tribe. He's one of the mods there, and he's also a curator on Reddit. He does the keto science and the carnivore. And then Jill Samter. I'm not familiar with her. You guys know who Jill is? No. And then some guy named Justin G, aka Outlife.carnivore. Anybody know who that guy is? And then Raymond Six-Pack Nazon. I'm gonna flip you like a jiu-jitsu buddy. He did a chapter, and it seems like there must have been a few more, but I know me and A-Day wound up doing 2 chapters, so maybe that is everybody. But there's going to be a YouTube playlist. I'll put it in the show notes so you guys can watch all the chapters or just listen to them. And then, because this book is not available in audio format, It's out of print. There's old copies. I know, like a first edition, you know, people are trying to get it like $1,000 for them now. So, but there's some copies floating around out there. Like we all read off of a PDF scan. That is probably one of the worst scans I've ever had to read.
Yeah.
The pages are crooked. Words are on the wrong lines. And on top of that, the sentence structure is unusual for us. The vocabulary is unusual for us. And
Names.
so names,
Yeah.
it was tough. It was brutal.
Like, look at that. Like 1740. It's like not even on the same line.
Yeah. So have a little mercy on the readers and try and enjoy the book. I think this is a great way to make this information accessible, especially to people who have trouble reading. So I really enjoyed torturing myself. When I edited my chapter 13, I think it was 110 edits I had to make in 2 hours of video. So yikes.
History in the making.
History in the making. Hopefully we'll do some more books. So what else do you guys want to say about the book?
I just want to clarify something so I don't have a bunch of Leafs mad at me. It's Manitoba. Manitoba, Canada is where he was born from.
All the Canadians are mad at you for messing that up.
Yeah, exactly. I apologize. If you made it this far and you're Canadian, send hate message at ollife.carnivore. Just DM, it's fine. I'll take care of it.
So Stephenson was born in Manitoba?
Yes.
He had immigrated with his, I thought he'd immigrated with his parents from Europe somewhere.
Immigrated from Iceland to Manitoba.
Oh.
So Arnez, Manitoba, Canada in 1879.
And then died in New Hampshire.
Yes.
Yeah.
New Hampshire.
Man, that's all I can say. He's had quite a life, and I am glad to be one of his shadows by being the carnivore diet.
He is on YouTube. There are film clips, they're all black and white, of him being interviewed.
Stop.
A number of people use him in their videos. I know I've seen him show up in Sean Baker's videos and probably some other people's videos. So, yeah, we should maybe do that because that would be great to hear it, get it from the horse's mouth. And he clarifies some stuff like, you know, a lot of people say like you got to eat organ meats and stuff like that. And he points out that the Inuits gave the organ meats to the dogs, you know, unless it was an emergency, like they're running out of food. And then they would eat the organ meats and then eat the dogs. So,
Right. If they ran out of food, they would eat the dogs. That's right.
or doggies.
Well, maybe put one of those links in the show notes too.
Absolutely.
That's cool. That's interesting to me.
He spent a total of over 10 years just eating meat, and including 2 in the United States under close observation, one of which they were actually locked in the, what do you call it, in a dietary ward, but
in a sane asylum.
Metabolic ward.
Metabolic
Ward. Yeah, locked in a metabolic ward being studied. Because even back then, it was hard for people to believe that you could just live on meat. Because people, you know, with the onset of the agricultural movement, people forgot that before we had agriculture, we just ate meat. So maybe we've been eating, you know, little by little, you know, grain and stuff like that became more and more available. But if you go back more than, say, 5,000 years, people hardly ate any plants because 95% of all plants are toxic. You can't just walk around munching on plants. And the regions where things like cereal grains, in fact, cereal grains are probably one of the last things introduced into our diets. Before that, yeah, the wind's really blowing, so I'm starting to shake. But anyways, yeah, so it puts it all into perspective, and then being on a carnivore diet really starts to seem like a natural way to go. And it seems like no wonder our bodies seem to run better, our brains seem to run better. You know, everything from women have an easier time giving birth, people don't get cavities, and so on and so forth. You know, little stuff like that we would assume had little to do with diet, other than, didn't we all grow up believing that eating candy gave you cavities?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the jump is we don't realize that, wheat, barley, corn and all that also contribute to cavities. You don't have to be eating sugar.
I was under the impression that it was the having the sugar in your mouth that gave you the cavities.
Cavities, right.
It was never about the actual nutrition of it.
That's right. Back then, that's exactly what they said. But now we're finding out it is the nutrition of it.
Well, and I mean, if you go through the gross explanation of the people's gums being able to be cut like cheese with a toothpick and their teeth falling out, we're experiencing the exact opposite with carnivore. I mean, there's times, this is gross, y'all, but there are times that I forget to brush my teeth because they're so clean. My teeth are so clean and so healthy, and my breath is so fresh. Like I just don't think about it. And it's the exact opposite of a rotting mouth, like a meth mouth with, their teeth falling out, and decay, the smell of decay.
There's hardly any odor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's touch on that because we talked about that before in our video, Carnivores Don't Stink. We find out that the bacteria that causes most cavities is Streptococcus, which is the same thing that gives you a sore throat. It loves to live in the film in your mouth, and it digests starches and sugars. And it does it jointly with Candida, which is a fungus, right? Is another problem that can plague people. And then outside our bodies lives Staphylococcus hominis, which is another thing that gives you body odor, right? And again, it apparently likes to live in an environment with plenty of sugar or starches or whatever. So by not eating starches and sugars, you reduce the level of Streptococcus and what was the fungus? Candida albicans and the Staphylococcus on your skin. So no surprise, people probably smell worse now.
I forget to take a shower sometimes too.
Well, yeah, and Ray made his kids smell his armpits and swear that he smells better now. So
Yeah.
I even started stopping using toothpaste. So I don't even have the need for that anymore. I brush, but without toothpaste. So,
yeah, I mean, who's surprised we don't get plaque on our teeth when we don't feed those little critters that build the plaque on our teeth, right?
Yeah. And the only
I don't have bad breath.
Right.
Like I just don't.
You don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Something I cannot translate to Zoom.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have smell-o-vision yet.
Hey, that's what we should do when we all meet in person. We'll
smell each other's breath. No.
All right.
We like dogs smelling each
Put his
other.
arms up. Give me a sniff.
Sniff test.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and making this video kind of these recordings of these chapters kind of brought things full circle for me, because one of my first popular videos I did a little book report on Fat of the Land. And I actually had people asking me to record the whole book. And I'm a really crappy reader. I'm dyslexic, so stumbling through this book was a nightmare. And so when the opportunity came up, I guess I was talking to 8A Fox in their book club. She has a book club meeting at once. And we're like, well, let's just divide it up, let's split it up. And everybody was really excited to do it. And it was a exciting project. So I hope we do another one. I mean, what do you guys think?
I loved it. I thought
Yeah.
it was great. It didn't take much of my time.
So drop in the comments below the book we should read, carnivore related.
I've suggested this one. We could maybe do this. This is
Yeah.
Nikki's book.
Yeah.
Another contender, but a very long book with the Weston A. Price book.
Yes. Physical Nutrition and Degeneration. You know what? Since we're on a roll of doing older books, I think that would be ideal, because first of all, those wouldn't be a problem with copyrights because they're out of print.
The other one I suggest in that that would be very good, but it's lesser known. Is called Studies and Deficiencies by McCarranson. And
yeah, that'd be a tough read. I read some of that. Yeah.
I don't think it's as hard as Fat of the Land, to be honest with you.
I don't know. That language is really different for me.
We could just try a little sample and see how it goes.
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then also, everybody, keep your eye out, because there's another group who's reading this book, and they're known as the Meat Elves. And the thing about the Meat Elves is they read it a little faster, and they're interesting to look at. They're kind of relaxing. So some of you who might imbibe in substances might enjoy that a little bit more than others. But keep an eye out for the Meat Elves. Read Fat of the Land, or as they call it, FOTL.
FOTL. And the book club that A-Day is doing or leading is meeting the third Monday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so that is
It's a Carnivore Book Club.
Regularly going to be happening.
You can find A-Day Fox on Instagram under
at
Black Carnivore.
Black Carnivore.
At Black Carnivore.
Yeah, and you can find I'll try to put all this stuff in the show notes. So if you guys are ever looking for something, go check the show notes, and you'll find it there. You'll find a link to the list of all these different chapters from Fat of the Land. I have a funny feeling the Meat Elves will show up there as well. So, any other closing remarks?
Great book. Really recommend this book. First of all, I believe any carnivores should definitely, if they have a chance, read this book for sure.
There is links to the PDF of this book in the show notes of the various chapters of the book that we read. So,
and there's an audible version now.
There's an audible version.
There's an audible version now. We made it.
Right, we made it.
Yeah, maybe we could come up with an audio platform, because we could probably actually compile the audio and put it up for people to listen to. That'd be great.
And trigger warning: the words and ideas sometimes do not express those of the readers.
Yeah,
that's right.
Language.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Language and others.
Yeah, there's some comments in there that clearly seem racist to people these days, but you got to remember this guy wrote them down 80 years ago. Things are a little different. So, but it is what it is. We didn't write the book. It's just how things were back then. So,
and this is the uncensored version you're getting.
Yeah. So, all right. Anything else, guys?
Nope. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yes, everybody, thank you for listening, and please like and subscribe. I have, my YouTube channel. Emily has a YouTube channel. Raymond and Justin are both coaches at MeetRx. Emily does coaching, carnivore coaching as well. If you really need help from me, you can get in touch with me. I'll do a little coaching as well. I don't do it full time, but I have a few regulars that I still help. So. But support the carnivore channels, subscribe to the other readers, and help grow the carnivore community, or actually help everybody in the low carb, under the low carb umbrella, because it really means something. And ratings and viewings and subscriptions ever since the COVID-19 came out has really been down for most of the people in the community on YouTube. So you can really make a difference by subscribing. It really helps. But until then, everybody eat some meat and feel better. And whatever you do,
don't fall down the carb hole.
Don't fall down the carb hole.